Singer Marc Anthony has been called one of the finest male vocalists recording today. He has twice sold out Madison Square Garden. He is one of the world's best-selling salsa artists. Time magazine rated his 1997 album Contra La Corriente as one of the year's 10 best. He also starred in Paul Simon's Broadway musical The Cape Man and currently appears in Martin Scorsese's new film Bringing Out the Dead. His new self-titled CD is his first major album to feature primarily English compositions. I'm pleased to have him on this program. Welcome.
Whoa, what a pleasure.
Thank you.
That was good.
Oh, it's good to have you here. There's one thing that I've often, that is part of this Latin explosion thing. Does it annoy you? Does it make you happy? Does it in some ways put you in a place where you kind of lump together with a lot of other artists, for better or worse, rather than capturing your individuality?
Yeah, all of the above. I think except make me happy kind of thing. Yeah. For so many reasons. You know, you hear day in, day out about this Latin music explosion, stuff like that, when the music that the world is being exposed to at this time, be it through Ricky Martin, Jennifer Lopez, or and Enrique Iglesias or myself, is not truly representative of Latin music, you know. So that in itself is just, you know, little things like that. I'd rather not be
lumped together
at all. I don't think anybody, any one of us. Because it's almost like we're invading or something, or like we don't belong, or like we're not from here and we're coming from somewhere else. And I was born and raised in New York City. You know, so many things. There's so many misconceptions of what it's like to be Latin, and I've heard them all over the past month and a half. Wow, I can go on and on about it.
So on balance, and it's kind of as you see it, I mean, it's not. There's more wrong with it than right with it. Right,
because it truly doesn't represent nothing I've read anyway, except the John Quinones piece that he did for ABC was truly representative of what we are as a people, what we represent, how we feel about this movement. I'd rather do it out.
Okay, but help me then understand what you would like to know, why the Quinones piece was good and why it says what you believe, or said another way.
Okay,
Tell me what you want to say about the Latin experience and who you are.
Let's start with the fact that I was born and raised in New York. I've been all over the world promoting this album, and you'll hear, how do you like America? You know, it's like, how do I like my backyard? You know, like they sort of put you in this place where like you don't belong, and it's the first time I ever felt like I didn't belong, and it's a little, I feel a little displaced sometimes. When you want to talk about Latin music, the music that's out there now that America's being exposed to definitely doesn't represent Latin music per se. I mean, I've been singing salsa for the past 8 years, thank God, and I've toured the world as a representative of Latin music. And when the world is exposed to this so-called wave that's happening now for the first time, and they think that truly represents Latin music, you sort of have to go on a campaign, and you end up correcting interviewers half the time, just educating. I mean, so I feel like I'm on this campaign of educating. On the other hand, just on so many levels, I just wish the Latin thing wasn't an issue. It's all about the music. You know, when I sing, I don't think about being Puerto Rican or American. I think about being an artist and just expressing myself the only way I know how. And that's what it should be about. It's, that's Marc Anthony, the Puerto Rican singer. Oh, all right, but does it have to be that? The music gets lost. The music gets lost.
All right, let's hear you sing. This is from My Baby You, which was written for your daughter, Ariana. Roll tape.
My baby, you are the reason I could fly.
As we watched this, I said to you, you're a little nervous watching yourself.
Yeah. I didn't expect that, and then And I've never seen that. That's I believe a concert I did in LA, and it was the first time I ever sang that song. It was the hardest thing for me to do. It was the absolute hardest thing for me to do, because the song is so personal. I had second thoughts about putting it on the album. You know, it's sort of like my my proclamation, my way of just telling my daughter. You know, I would have probably much rather just play for her at home and just have it as a little thing. But performing, I almost didn't do it. And seeing it, I'm like, oh, you know, it's so personal.
You told me also that you didn't set out to become a singer. It just happened.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly how it happened. It's the weirdest thing. They go, oh, so when did you decide to be a singer? I never decided to be a singer. You know, I mean, till this day. And I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, I was asked, and that's when I realized that you know, my dad is a musician, a writer, composer, and a singer, and there's music around the house 24 hours a day. I mean, that's what I remember. I remember my dad correcting me on notes. No, this is how you do it. And I'm 3 years old, 4 years old, and he'd put me up on the kitchen table, and so I'd sing for his friends, and I never stopped doing it. So it is. I was just born a singer, you know.
Does it bring you great satisfaction?
Absolutely. I've never come across anything besides my daughter that has ever brought me such satisfaction. It's therapeutic in so many ways, and you know, it's definitely a world to get lost in. You know, just close your eyes and you know, just escape for a little bit.
How much of your stuff do you write?
You know, I used to write quite a bit in the 80s. And I stopped. When I started singing salsa, there were so many writers that I was dying to work with, and who just did it so much better than me, you know. And so I stepped back from it, and I haven't written in 10 years. It's the first time I write.
This album?
Yeah, in over 10 years, and there's probably wrote 90% of it. Yeah. So it was extremely fulfilling.
Songs include "When I Dream at Night," "Am I the Only One?"
Yeah.
"I Need to Know," "You Sang to Me," "My Baby You," "No One," "How Could I," "That's Okay," and then there's "Cape Man." Was that for you in the end a very good experience because you were associated with great artists? What?
It was always a great experience. I never lived a bad experience during that whole thing at all, ever. See, in the beginning, I set out to learn as much as I could. That I remember just saying, you know what, I have to be the luckiest man alive. I'm just going to sit back, watch the masters at work, and Paul took me under his wing, and I remember him writing songs, and I'd be in the room, and I was just like, when did this happen? I'm like, whew. You know, so all along, I just felt really, really fortunate to even be in the same city as a talent that was on that stage, and I just set out just
behind the stage.
Yeah. Oh, but just. In every single way, it was an amazing experience. I don't think not one day was I don't remember one day that I was like, what?
Was it disappointing that it didn't go as expected?
You know what? I never thought of that either. I not for a second. You know, there were plenty of people worrying about that. I remember just having to go on stage and giving my all. I'd read the reviews. I read nothing. It was all about the theater, getting to the theater and enjoying it as much as possible, learning as much as possible. And that's what that experience was for me, just totally. I can't say that, I can't say anything else about it. It was the most amazing experience I've ever lived. You know. The
most amazing experience you've ever lived? Ever lived.
It was over 3 years, and if for any musician to be given the opportunity to work with someone that he admires, Ruben Blades was my all-time idol. I used to be his water boy. You know, when he'd go on tour, I was one who would bring him water on stage.
So he taught you about salsa?
Oh, he taught me about life. He taught me about being a friend, what being a man was, and he showed me by example. And to play the same character on stage, you know, like there's a whole journey, and I could close my eyes and see the journey. But when I realized, like, we're playing the same character on Broadway, we're going through something we've never been through. At the same time, I thought that there was nothing he had never lived, and it was in so many ways. It was just, I wouldn't change it for anything in the world.
Is he the role model?
Ruben Blades, yes, absolutely.
Is the role model.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Paul has so much to do with who I am today. Ruben, since I was 15 years old, I was Ruben. I mean, the fact that I'm doing movies now has so much to do with Ruben.
I was going to ask that. Why? Because he said you've got to reach out, you've got to expand, you've got to grow, you've got to...
No, we would talk about it all the time, and he goes, "Have you ever thought about it?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You ever dreamed about it?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "So why don't you?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." He goes, but he showed me by example. He goes, "I've done it. It's possible." And it was his agent, David Lewis, at the time, who said, "Oh, really? Ruben told me that you might be interested." "Oh, so I'll keep you in mind." And I got sent the script, Hackers. I went for the reading, and I ended up getting it. It was my first film. I was like, but he showed me by example. It's not, just words of wisdom and, almighty kind of. It was just that,
How did you get in Scorsese's film?
I did a film a while ago with Stanley Tucci, Campbell Scott, and Isabella Rossellini, movie by Big Night.
Yeah. Great film.
What a pleasure. I mean, what a pleasure. And so the casting director was Ellen Lewis. And so when this film came around, I hadn't seen her in a while, but I get a call saying, Marc, and I still don't know how to take this. She says, "Look, there's this role in the Scorsese film. He's a little crazy. He's homeless, but I think you'd be perfect for it." I'm like, okay. I was like, I still don't know where that came from. But she convinced Marty to read for him, and I read and I got it. It was that.
Here's a scene. Roll tape.
Oh.
There's a special room at the hospital for terminating. It's a nice, quiet room with a big bed.
Move, stupid!
You mean that? This is crazy. This is surreal. Surreal to even see
Nick
that.
Cage and Martin Scorsese.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. It's overwhelming.
Hard decision to make this English?
No, not at all. Not at all. I started singing in English. A lot of people don't know that. I started the first 12 years of my career was all English, and I recorded an album for Atlantic Records in '91. So it's sort of like a return. The funny thing is that, this music lives in me. I was born and raised here in New York during the 70s and 80s, and so I was influenced by all kinds of music, so for the past 8 years, I tapped into the Latin influences, the records my mom used to play, and my dad that I used to tell her, "Mom, turn that off," because I couldn't relate. So the last thing I ever thought was that I was going to do salsa. The last thing I ever thought. But no, it was an extremely pleasant experience. It's something that this anxiety that's been building up in me over the past couple of years, and it's just another way of expressing myself. It's mine.
Where do you see all this going for you?
For me?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ruben, he balances between Broadway and songs and singing and acting and running for president of Panama.
Yeah. Where do I see it? Just, you know what? Every experience I've lived, every situation I found myself in, I've wanted to. Thank God. I don't choose a project simply to choose a project. I've learned so much. I've seen so much. I just wanted to continue being that way. Because you sort of, when you see something through, all the way through, from a thought, from an idea, from a dream, and you just see it all the way through, that's extremely fulfilling, and that's all I've lived thus far. Just to find myself in that place, to continue doing things for the right reasons, and just learn, just sit back, learn, and just walk through life doing what I love to do.
The big turning point was what, that 1993 Latin Music Convention?
Yeah. That night.
Yeah.
It was the scariest night of my life. No one knew who I was, and I walk on stage to sing this song that no one had ever heard, and it was a convention for program directors for radio. So I was like the 30th act, and they're like, okay, you know, taking notes. And
they're saying, show me what you've got, entertain me, prove me you were good.
I had no clothes. I had to borrow clothes. I jumped on the stage, and I was shaking, and I start performing, and I close my eyes, and the only thing I could think about was just think about your mom. Think about when you used to sing in the living room. You know, just close your eyes and just, you're going to have to stand there anyway. So enjoy it a little. I sang, and the song was over. I turn around. I'm about to run off the stage, and my manager tells me, turn around. And everybody was standing up, and it was a standing ovation. And every program director in America was in this room. There was like 1,000 of them. And I actually heard calls saying, no, his name is Marc Anthony. Check the garbage. I threw it out this morning. You know, and then it was amazing. But that one day, the following day, I was played across the country.
It was different.
Oh, yeah.
Next day it was different.
Yeah, I was being played on every radio.
When people say things like the Latin Sinatra, you say, I'm complimented by Frank Sinatra, but.
Yeah, exactly. But I totally have to see it for what it is. I mean, his musical legacy is beyond almost comprehension. If anybody was to set out and accomplish what he did, forget about it.
Not gonna happen.
It's not going to happen. But you have to see it for what it is. I totally see it for what it is. It's a skinny singer thing, who acts.
Yeah.
You know, I have to believe that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
You know.
And has an authenticity.
Okay.
Marc Anthony's album. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you. Back in a moment. Stay with us. Marc Jacobs is here. The New York Times has called him one of the most important American designers today. He has won the fashion world's equivalent to the Oscar twice for his women's collections. Because of his reputation as America's bad boy of fashion, many were surprised last year when he took over as the artistic director at Louis Vuitton. He is currently designing their first ever ready-to-wear collection, which will be shown in March. I am pleased to have him on this broadcast at the time of these kinds of tributes to his work. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Is the bad boy thing right? Are they? I mean, should they be surprised that you got this award?
It's really strange. It's this name that sort of I've been stuck with. I mean, I think I've done certain things. I mean, I think I've been, in a way, for perhaps American fashion, I've been considered somewhat of a heretic. And I don't really understand why. Although, I mean, I have done certain collections. My last collection that I did when I was working at Perry Ellis, designing the women's collections for Perry Ellis, was I was hailed the guru of grunge by Women's Wear Daily. And I think that people were quite, I don't know, they didn't know quite what to think. It was a shocking collection for them, the idea of making all of these sort of very poor clothes and very expensive fabrics, and that the lengths were all awkward and things were all askew.
The bad boy thing, though, comes from your lifestyle, your personal lifestyle, or I think what you do in fashion?
Well, again, this is a name that's been given me that I think perhaps it has to do a little bit with my my personal life, which I can't imagine too much. I mean, I like to go out at night and have a good time, but I don't think I'm bad.
Have you wanted to do this for a long time?
Yes, I mean, I've been interested in fashion since I was very young. I don't know how it really started. I think I was just, I was born here in New York City, and I was raised here. And I remember seeing, I guess it was in the late 70s, that I became very aware of very extraordinarily glamorous-looking people, young people, who were dressed in a certain way, and I was just very attracted to the idea of dressing, and I thought that that was something so, such a human thing to want to adorn or decorate yourself, and I loved the pageantry of fashion, and I got involved.
And you said, how'd you get involved?
Well, I started by going to the High School of Art and Design here in New York City. That is basically was my first kind of training, and I studied costume history and life drawing and all kinds of art courses. And then I went to Parsons School of Design, and then I met my partner, who's still my partner to this day, and he got me a job designing a sort of junior collection for a 7th Avenue company.
When did you meet Perry Ellis?
I met Perry Ellis, actually, I met Perry Ellis while I was in high school. I was working at a store here in New York called Charivari, and Perry Ellis was living on the Upper West Side, as was I, and I ran into him and I asked his advice. I was a huge fan of his, and I asked his advice what I should do about pursuing a career as a fashion designer, and he said, well, you must go to the Parsons School of Design, and I did. It was quite strange that years later I would end up taking over as the women's designer of Perry Ellis.
For Perry Ellis, yeah.
After he died. So.
When you look at, if someone came to you today and said, this is what I want to do, I want to be you, you know.
Oh, God.
Jacob, I want to be. No. But essentially, you'd give them the same advice that Perry Ellis gave you.
Well,
go to school, or would you give them some other advice?
You know what? I don't know that I would say to go to school. I think, in a way, the way fashion has gone today, I think the more you know about clothes, or the more you're taught about clothing in the classical sort of sense, or in the school way of teaching, I think that you become a little locked. It becomes harder to break the rules when you know them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I have to say that I would think that the best education for anybody, although it's very difficult to obtain, is to work. You know, if there is a designer that you admire, if there's anything that anybody, you know, if there was any way that you could be around that working environment in any capacity, I would think that would be far better training than actually going to school. I mean, I think that what I learned in Parsons was very valuable, pattern making and things like that. But it does sort of get you locked into what you're taught.
Do you have to know things like pattern making, whatever that is?
Some people do. I mean, there are plenty of designers
you
who
can be
are
a brilliant
architects.
designer without knowing anything.
There were designers who are architects really by training, and maybe, you know, I don't know that every designer knows how to make a pattern. I don't know that every designer knows how to drape cloth. I think that it probably is helpful to know those things, but I don't think that it's necessary.
And if you look at all those designers you like and admire, whoever they are, what is it you admire about those that you like a lot?
God, there's, you know, it's different because I think there's certain designers who represent a modernity and a sort of abstract kind of thing that is something I could never do. It's not within me to do. So they become really admirable for their completely abstract vision. Then there are other people, like a Ray Kawakubo, who designs Comme des Garçons, for instance. And there are people like Saint Laurent, who I just respect for the fact, well, what he's done in his whole life and continues to do, which is just, you know, dress women in this in his style in such a beautiful way. There are contemporary designers, people like Helmut Lang, who I think is, you know, an extremely talented and modern-thinking young designer. There's so many. I have such respect for anybody who can do this job. I mean, to do it well is already beyond, but it's really, you know, choice or design and design choices, it's a hard thing, and to do it well, to have a vision. I mean, Ralph Lauren, I respect for his vision. You know, some people, you know, think that creativity means something bizarre or something different or unusual. But I think that creativity comes in a lot of different ways. I think what Ralph has achieved as an American designer, I mean, I think he's the most American designer. I think he's the quintessential American designer. And I have great, great respect and admiration for him. I think...
And because he knew what it was to be quintessentially American, then he's built an empire on that idea.
Which, again, to me, may not be as creative in terms of the clothing that he makes, but the concept and the lifestyle and the way that this is all, you know, he's touched in, or his vision, obviously, is a vision that reaches so many people. They can relate to that. They can appreciate that. They want part of that dream. And therefore, you know, by Ralph Lauren. I mean, anyway, I'm fascinated by him. And again, it's so difficult to sort of pin it down because there are so many people who really have very special
How about
traits.
Lagerfeld?
Well, Karl Lagerfeld, I just don't know how anybody can do quite so much as Karl Lagerfeld. He's, first of all, one of the most fast-talking people, and the idea of doing Fendi and Lagerfeld and Chanel and I mean, the man is just, I don't know if he ever sleeps.
How about Armani?
Well, Armani, again, it's like, for me, it's if you have Ralph Lauren in America, you have Giorgio Armani in Italy, and you have Yves Saint Laurent in Paris. You know, it's almost like they sort of seem like the archetype of what that style of each country is.
In terms of going from season to season to season. Now, where are you now?
Now, let's see. Depending on which company you're talking about.
Okay, well, let's do
company.
take your company first. We'll get to this Vuitton business in a minute.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, but where are you in your company?
In my company.
Yeah.
Well,
you're designing for what season?
What season? I am designing for, God, what am I designing for? Fall of the next year.
The fall of next year will be the
98.
fall of '98.
Yes.
Okay, so it's now we're now in the winter of '98, and you're doing, or we're in the beginning of '98.
Yes.
What are you thinking about, and what are you looking for a theme? I mean, what is it you got to do to make this right?
It's funny because, you know, there used to be a time, I think, in the beginning when I started working that it never really started out with a theme, but there was something, you know, things. I mean, you work on a collection over a course of 6 months. Between the time you buy the fabrics and the time you do the fittings, by the time you actually have the show, it really is a process that continues. So I don't normally go to an exhibition, see something, become inspired, and that's it. Because I work daily, so it's a progressive thing, and it sort of evolves.
But do you begin with fabric? It does begin with fabric.
For me, it begins with fabric, yeah.
And where does that happen? Do you go to some fabric house, or do you go to 100 fabric houses?
You know, it's funny because, again, over years, you sort of start to edit. There become mills that you work with and that you consistently like what they produce. They produce a quality that you can depend on. They have an understanding of what it is you're trying to achieve. And, you know, then, of course, minimum requirements and all the kind of things that you need to have to deal with. And so, and then there's always those people that you count on because they've worked with you and worked for you for years and years and years, or seasons after seasons. And then there's also the other side of you that wants to always look for a new one that can do something that maybe you haven't done before.
I assume that you like natural fabrics best, do you?
I'm really a natural kind of guy, yeah. I like cotton, wool, silk, cashmere. You know, I like very luxury fibers, but I'm kind of a purist in terms of that stuff, yeah. I like natural fibers.
So you choose the fabric, and then you begin a process of sort of hits and misses, deciding what the concept's going to be and what the design's
and then
going to
I start to think about shape, you know, shapes and proportions. For instance, this season or the season that's just past spring, I felt that I wanted to create a very feminine silhouette, something with more fullness in a skirt, which is not something I'm very comfortable with because I tend to like the minimum amount of fabric. And I've always liked a very clean line, a very simple line, a straight line. And I just sort of felt like I couldn't go anywhere else with that. And although I've done it bias and straight grain in all kinds of different ways, I felt this season I wanted more fullness and more femininity. So that came really in the shape of the skirts, and we started pleating fabrics and doing things like that. And
Grunge. What did you do? I mean,
I don't know. That was it didn't start out that way. I have a great love for music, and I was very into this quote unquote alternative music scene at the time that I was working at Perry Ellis, and I became fascinated by bands like Nirvana. And I thought this music was just so incredible because it reminded me of sort of when I was younger, and punk rock was really, again, something that was just something none of us had ever heard before. It just was a new thing. And alternative, or what the sound of was coming out of Seattle, or grunge, had to me that same kind of shock, and I wanted to create a collection that basically was visual noise. So we clashed patterns and stripes and colors and textures, and we layered it. I mean, girls were wearing 10 layers of clothes. I mean, of course, they were all very fine, and, you know, it was silk chiffons over laces over whatever. So it was a very deluxe version of this grunge attitude. But again, I didn't originally start out to do grunge. I just wanted to create some kind of visual noise by clashing patterns.
And how do you define it, grunge?
Well, again, in terms of the music, it was this label given to this sound that didn't really fit into rock and roll categories. And for clothes, I think it described this disheveled, sort of awkward proportions. There was something very off and askew about the whole thing. Things that were too short or too long, things that were shrunken or oversized. It was just basically, I think it was questioning what was correct.
If you look at all that you have done, and certainly the more recent things, is music a primary influence, or
music and street culture has always been a very, very big influence on what I do. The thing is that as I've gone on, the influence is less visible because it becomes, the interpretation, I think, has become more and more sophisticated. My interpretation, for instance, last fall, I was very inspired by how all the kids on Lafayette Street look, the skater kids, because they wear these enormous, enormous pants. And the volume of the pants looks so brilliant, especially on these, you know, young kids with their very narrow torsos. So I love that. But of course, we didn't do it in denim and striped cotton jersey anymore. So we made wonderful, large, wide leg trousers out of cashmere with very, very skinny cashmere sweaters. So again, the silhouette was what was inspiring, but the execution was done in the most flawless fabrics.
Well, where did they come from then? Where did they get the stuff? And are you saying that if you want to see what is, and I think people like Anna Wintour have said this to me, if you want to see where the determinant is for fashion, it's in the street somewhere. Somebody out there is being creative about the way what they wear, and they're putting some stuff together, and then there's some hot fashion designer like you comes along and watches it, and others, and say, you know, they're onto something, and then you translate it into a look and create stuff, and then, you know. Yeah,
it's that cycle. I think, you know, this is, again...
And then they decide to do something else.
This is, going back to Saint Laurent just for a minute, this was something that Saint Laurent was quite, what he had done in the 60s that was quite shocking was he had taken the idea of a leather motorcycle jacket, something that was considered very street and certainly not couture at all, and he'd done it like in crocodile. Now, it didn't resemble at all a motorcycle jacket, but this black jacket in its proportion had the presence of that with black boots. So, you know, there was this kind of idea of taking from the street and elevating it to a couture level, which has existed before this moment. But I think the reason that it exists now, and I think that the reason it's such a turn-on, is because young people don't have the same restrictions. They don't have to play by the same rules. In fact, young people are quite rebellious, so anything that their parents do, I mean, especially in New York or wherever youth culture thrives and wherever there's a music kind of scene, they don't want to be like the establishment. So what they do and what materials are available to them creates a style. Do you know? I mean, the idea of taking very, very huge pants and having them almost fall off you, it's like, I don't know where that came from, but all you know is that that is not what people who were going to work on Wall Street looked like. So they were not, you know, they were affecting these looks. Maybe there's a comfort part to it. You know, snowboarding clothes, all these kind of sort of daredevil sports. The clothes that kids are wearing to do these things are fantastic in proportion. It's just like nothing you've ever seen before. So, in a way, I think that's you know, that is inspiring to a lot of people, and it's having a certain eye and a sensibility to appreciate that. But I think it does work for a lot of people.
Louis Vuitton.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't seem like, it's not something I would have predicted.
Me either, that's for sure.
Why did it happen?
Actually, I met Mr. Bernard Arnault, who is the head of LVMH, who owns LVMH, and he was looking to make quite a few changes within certain companies in his organization. He had different presidents from different companies, from Dior to Givenchy, interview me for the possible job as couturier for one of these houses. After meeting these people and after seeing him a couple of times, he came up with this idea that he would like, perhaps for me, to design a line of ready-to-wear and fashion accessories for Louis Vuitton. And in fact, in the end, that was the decision that he made.
Why is this good for you?
Why is this good for me? This is a good question. Well, it is very good for me. First of all, Louis Vuitton is a very... Louis Vuitton is a very prestigious name.
It is.
It has definitely...
But 9 out of 10 people I know would say luggage.
Right, exactly. But it is a good name. It represents a very high-quality product. It's a very expensive product. It's a very prestigious product. All the things that I like. And it's also never been done. There was not a ready-to-wear line of Louis Vuitton. There wasn't a Mr. So-and-so who used to design it. Right. Now I'm going to have to fill his shoes.
You're not following in the footsteps of somebody.
Which is a plus and a minus. You know, it's the absolute curse and blessing at the same time.
I'd rather take it as a blessing than a curse.
Right. No, I take it as a blessing. It's really great. But what it does create is this responsibility to really think it through. You know, and perhaps I won't get it right in the first season. Perhaps it'll take time, you know, to really get it right. Because to figure out who is Louis Vuitton, I mean, what does Louis Vuitton clothing mean? You know, I'm not going to make a cashmere. I mean, their bags are virtually indestructible, but I can't make a cashmere sweater that's indestructible, because the properties of cashmere that people, what they value in it is its softness, its loftiness, and it is a fragile fiber. It's just the nature of the beast. So anything you do, I mean, I'm not going to plastic coat cashmere so that it can be worn forever. It doesn't make sense, which is, you know, what their bags are. So it gives me a little bit of a funny assignment here, because on one hand I want to do something that's quite fashionable, but then also I'd like to come up with a solution. And like I said, this may come with time, of what really Vuitton clothes should be.
New Yorker magazine in September 1997, 22nd issue, Can Marc Jacobs Make Louis Vuitton Hip? Thank you again.
We'll see,
give it a
try.
Back in a moment. Stay with us.